I'm 62 years old, and if someone had told me 5 years ago that falling in love again would almost cost me the 4 boutique hotels I'd spent 28 years building from the ground up, I would have said they were crazy. But that's exactly what nearly happened. And the only reason I'm still standing here today, still running my properties along the Florida Keys, still independent and whole, is because I made one decision that everyone said was paranoid. When I married Thomas Whitmore, I never told him or his 2 daughters that the hotels weren't part of some complicated family trust or corporate partnership. I let them believe I was just the manager, the face of the operation. But the truth? Every single property, every room key, every piece of furniture, it was all mine. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Diane Sullivan, though most people in the Keys just call me Diane. I bought my first property in 1997, a rundown 6-room inn in Marathon that everyone said was a money pit. I was 34 years old, recently divorced, raising my son Jason on my own, and working 3 jobs: receptionist during the day, bartending at night, and cleaning vacation rentals on weekends. The bank manager actually laughed when I asked for the loan. A single mother with barely any credit history wanting to buy a failing motel? But I had something he didn't. I had vision, determination, and I knew the Florida Keys were about to explode as a destination. I got that loan, barely, by putting up everything I owned as collateral. I spent the next 2 years renovating that property myself, learning plumbing, basic electrical work, painting until 3 in the morning while Jason did homework at the front desk. I named it the Coral Bay Inn, and I made it something special. Locally sourced artwork, partnerships with fishing charters, personal concierge service that the big chains couldn't match. By 1999, I was profitable. By 2002, I'd bought a second property in Islamorada. By 2008, a third in Key West. And by 2015, a fourth back in Marathon, right on the water. Do you understand what it takes to build something like that? The hurricanes I weathered, literally and financially. The seasons when tourism dropped and I had to choose between paying my staff or paying my mortgage. The 80-hour weeks, the times I slept in the laundry room because I couldn't afford to go home. The guests who became family, the staff who became my second team. Every decision, every sacrifice, every triumph, that was me, mine. By the time Jason graduated from the University of Miami and moved to Atlanta for his tech job, I had a small empire. 4 properties, 47 rooms total, worth about $6. $5 million combined. I wasn't rich by Miami standards, but I was comfortable. I had a beautiful condo in Key Largo that I actually got to sleep in most nights. I had a reputation in the hospitality industry as someone who'd built something authentic, and I was profoundly, achingly lonely. My first marriage had ended when Jason was 6. His father had cheated, moved to Texas, barely stayed in touch. I'd dated over the years, but nothing serious. I'd been too busy building, surviving, fighting to establish myself in an industry that didn't always take women seriously. But at 57, with Jason living his own life and my general manager, Rita, running day-to-day operations smoothly, I found myself sitting alone in my condo, watching sunset over the water, wondering if this was all there was. That's when I met Thomas at a charity gala for marine conservation in Key West. He was 63 then, tall, weathered in that distinguished way that comes from a lifetime on the water, a recently retired Coast Guard captain. He bid on a weekend stay at my Key West property during the auction, and when he won, he came over to introduce himself with this warm, genuine smile. "I've heard wonderful things about your hotels," he said. "People say you've really captured the spirit of the Keys." He came that following month, stayed 3 nights, and we had dinner together twice. He told me about his 30 years in the Coast Guard, about the lives he'd saved, about finally being ready to enjoy his retirement. He talked about his late wife, Sarah, who'd died 3 years earlier from cancer, about how much he missed having someone to share things with. By the third dinner, we were talking about seeing each other again. Thomas was thoughtful, romantic in a quiet way. He'd bring me coffee when I was doing paperwork at the Marathon property. He'd book surprise weekend trips to small islands I'd never visited despite living here for decades. He listened when I talked about the challenges of running small hotels in an era of Airbnb and big chains. He seemed proud of what I'd accomplished, fascinated by my journey from 3 jobs to 4 properties. Looking back now, with the clarity that only comes from nearly losing everything, I can see what I missed. But at the time, I was just a 57-year-old woman who'd been alone most of her adult life, falling in love with someone who seemed safe, stable, and genuinely interested in me. We got engaged 10 months later. He proposed on the beach behind my Key West hotel at sunset with a ring that must have cost $15,000. I said yes with tears streaming down my face, feeling like maybe, finally, I got to have this too. Not just success, but love. Not just accomplishment, but companionship. That's when I met his daughters. Thomas had 2, Victoria, 44, who worked in real estate development in Tampa, and Amanda, 41, who was some kind of investment consultant in Fort Lauderdale. They both lived in South Florida, and Thomas was close with them, talked to them almost daily. The first time they came to visit my properties, about 3 weeks after the engagement, Victoria walked through my Key West hotel like she was conducting a market analysis. "How many properties do you manage?" she asked. "What's the ownership structure? Is this a franchise or independent? What are the annual revenues per property?" I kept my answers vague, smiled a lot. "It's a family operation," I said. "Everything's been set up through various trusts and partnerships. It's complicated. You know how these things are." Amanda wanted financials. "With 4 properties, you must be looking at significant cash flow. Have you considered expanding, refinancing? With real estate values in the Keys right now, you're sitting on serious equity." I laughed it off. "I'm pretty conservative with business decisions. I've been through enough economic cycles to know slow and steady wins." Then Victoria asked about estate planning. 3 weeks after Thomas proposed to me. "You and Dad are getting married. You really should have all your documents in order. You know, for tax purposes, for succession planning. Have you updated your will? What about beneficiaries on the properties?" I was 57 years old and healthy as could be. I looked at Thomas, waiting for him to tell his daughter that was inappropriate, but Thomas just squeezed my hand and said, "Victoria's right, honey. We should both make sure everything's properly organized. It's the responsible thing to do when you're blending families." Jason flew down from Atlanta for the wedding weekend. The night before, sitting on my condo balcony with mojitos, he said, "Mom, are you sure about this? Those daughters of his give me a weird vibe. They're just protective of their father," I said. "He's all they have left since their mother died." "Yeah, but Mom, the way Victoria was taking photos of the hotel lobbies, the way Amanda was asking about occupancy rates, I see that behavior in investors all the time. They're assessing value. You're being paranoid. Did you get a prenup?" Of course I got a prenup. My attorney, Sharon Davis, insisted on it. "Good. And Mom, please tell me you were clear about what's yours." I had been. The prenup was ironclad. Assets acquired before marriage remained separate property. My hotels, my business, all mine. What I didn't tell Jason, or Sharon, or even Thomas, was what I told Thomas and his daughters about the properties. I lied. Not a big lie, just strategic misdirection. I let them believe the hotels were owned through a complicated trust structure, that there were other investors, that I was the managing partner but not the sole owner. When they asked direct questions, I was vague. My attorneys handle the corporate structure, or it's set up through family trusts, or there are several stakeholders involved. Was it dishonest? Maybe. But something deep in my gut told me to protect this information. Some instinct I'd developed over 28 years of fighting to build and keep my business told me that Thomas's daughters, seeing me as a woman who solely owned $6.5 million in prime Florida Keys real estate, might not be good. And God, was I right. The wedding was small, intimate. We got married at my Key West property, on the beach, with the sunset behind us. Jason was my best man. Victoria and Amanda stood as Thomas's attendants, all smiles, both of them hugging me and calling me Mom, which should have been sweet but felt rehearsed. We didn't honeymoon. High season was starting, and I couldn't leave Rita to handle it alone. Thomas said he understood. He moved into my condo, bringing his furniture, his books, his collection of nautical charts. We settled into married life. For the first 18 months, it was good. Thomas seemed content to play golf, to go fishing with his Coast Guard buddies, to sit on the balcony in the evenings with a beer and watch the boats go by. He didn't interfere with my business. He didn't ask too many questions. He was just there. Companionship. Someone to come home to. But then things shifted. It started with Amanda. She came to visit alone one Sunday and asked if she could take a look at the books, just to see if there are any tax optimization opportunities. She said, "Dad mentioned you might want to bring in some investors to expand, and I have connections in that world." I'd never mentioned wanting investors. "Thanks, Amanda, but Rita and I have the financial side handled. We have a great accountant." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Diane, we're family now. We want to help. That's what family does." Then Victoria started showing up with appraisers. "Just for insurance purposes," she'd say. "With climate change and rising sea levels, you need to make sure you're properly covered. I'm seeing comparable properties in the Keys going for crazy prices. You should know what you're sitting on." I already had excellent insurance, but she kept pushing. "Have you had the properties formally appraised recently? I'm seeing waterfront hotels in Marathon selling for $2 million plus. Key West properties, even more. Your portfolio could be worth 8, maybe 9 million now." I asked her to stop. She looked hurt, but I saw something else in her eyes. Calculation. The most disturbing thing was Thomas. He started asking me to sign things. "Just updating beneficiaries on my life insurance," he'd say, sliding documents across the kitchen counter. Standard stuff. I read every word. Half the time, the documents weren't about life insurance at all. They were financial powers of attorney, property management agreements, papers that would give him authority over my accounts and properties. "Thomas, I'm not signing this." "Why not? Don't you trust me?" "We're married, Diane." "It's not about trust. I just don't sign documents I don't fully understand." He'd get cold then, distant, wouldn't speak to me for days. And then came the phone calls. I'd catch him on the phone outside, walking along the dock where I couldn't hear. When I asked who it was, he'd say, "Just Victoria," or "Just Amanda," or "Nobody important." 4 years into the marriage, I came back early from a meeting with a hotel supply company in Miami to find Thomas, Victoria, and Amanda in my home office. They had my filing cabinet open. They had my business documents spread across my desk. "What are you doing?" I asked. They all jumped like they'd been caught. Amanda quickly started gathering papers. Victoria closed the filing cabinet. Thomas smiled that smooth smile. "We were just looking for your insurance policies, honey." "Victoria's right. We need to make sure everything's properly covered. Those are private business documents. You had no right." "Diane, I'm your husband. Married couples don't keep secrets." That night, I called Sharon. "I think something's wrong. I need you to run a property check on all 4 hotels. Make sure everything's still properly filed in my name. Check the county records, the state business registrations, everything." "Diane, what's going on?" "I don't know, but I have a very bad feeling." She called me back 4 days later. Her voice was tight. "Diane, someone's been filing documents. Transfer deeds, partnership agreements, papers that would give Thomas and his daughters ownership stakes in your properties." My hands went cold. "What? How is that possible? I never signed anything like that. The signatures look like yours at first glance. But Diane, these are forgeries. Clumsy forgeries once you compare them to your actual signature. Whoever did this wasn't even good at it. Can they do that? Can they just file fake documents?" "They can file them. Whether they hold up in court is another question, and they won't. But Diane, this is fraud. This is a crime. You need to report this." I felt sick. I sat down on my balcony, phone pressed to my ear, looking out at the water I'd watched for nearly 30 years. What do I do? File a police report, get an injunction, and Diane, you need to confront Thomas. But I didn't confront Thomas. Not yet, because I did something else first. I called an old friend of mine, a private investigator named Carlos Mendoza, who I'd worked with years ago when I needed background checks on potential business partners. "Carlos, I need you to look into someone for me. Thomas Whitmore. Everything. Financial history, criminal record, and especially, I need you to find out about his first wife, how she died. What happened to her estate?" It took Carlos 3 weeks. When we met at a quiet cafe in Islamorada, he had a folder 2 inches thick. Thomas's first wife, Sarah, had died 5 years ago. But 6 months before her death, she'd transferred her entire estate, a $3 million home in Coral Gables, her retirement accounts, everything, into Thomas's name. She'd had early onset Alzheimer's. Sarah's brother had tried to contest the transfers, claiming Thomas had taken advantage of her diminished capacity. But Thomas had documents, power of attorney, transfer papers, all signed by Sarah. The brother claimed they were forgeries or had been signed when Sarah didn't understand. The case settled out of court. The brother got a small payout. Thomas kept everything. There was more. Before Sarah, Thomas had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Patricia Brennan, who'd owned a successful catering business in Fort Myers. Patricia had died in a boating accident 7 years ago. She'd also transferred her business assets to Thomas shortly before her death. Her adult son had tried to fight it but was blocked by the same lawyers Thomas used for Sarah's case. Victoria had been sued twice by former clients for fraudulent real estate practices. Amanda had been fired from 2 investment firms, the reasons sealed but the pattern clear. Carlos looked at me across the table. "Diane, this is a family of con artists. They've done this before. They're doing it to you now." I couldn't breathe. "What do I do?" "You get out. You divorce him. You press charges. You protect yourself." But I'd spent 28 years building my hotels. These people thought they could just walk in, forge some papers, and take what I'd created? No, I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to make sure they could never do this to anyone else again. I went back to Sharon. "I want to build a case, a real case. Not just for divorce, for fraud, for attempted theft, for forgery. I want criminal charges against all of them." Sharon looked at me carefully. "Diane, that's going to be ugly. That's going to be public. Your hotel's reputations." "My hotel's reputations are built on integrity and quality. These people tried to steal from me. I want everyone to know it." We built the case methodically. Sharon brought in a forensic accountant who went through every record. We found more forged signatures, 6 different documents. We found email chains between Victoria and Amanda discussing maximizing value extraction. We found text messages from Thomas to his daughters about handling me and staying patient. We also found something else. Thomas had done this before Sarah. There was a third woman, Rachel, who died in a fall at her home. She'd also transferred property to Thomas shortly before her death. Her daughter had tried to contest it but was shut down by lawyers. 3 women, 3 estates transferred just before death, and now a 4th woman, me, who they were trying to manipulate. I wasn't dying. I wasn't sick. I was healthy and sharp and 61 years old. But if I'd been just a little more trusting, a little less careful, who knows what could have happened. Sharon filed everything with the state attorney. We had enough for criminal fraud charges against Victoria and Amanda, and for Thomas, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. But before any of that went public, I wanted my confrontation. I planned it carefully. I told Thomas I wanted to have a celebration dinner, all of his daughters, Jason, and some friends, to mark our 4th anniversary. He was thrilled. He thought I'd finally embraced being part of his family. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening at my Key West hotel, on the beachfront patio. I had Rita set up tables with ocean views. I hired a caterer. I made sure my best wine was flowing. Thomas, Victoria, and Amanda arrived dressed beautifully, all smiles. Jason arrived with his girlfriend, giving me a questioning look. I'd briefed him that morning. And then my other guests arrived. Sharon Davis, my attorney. Carlos Mendoza, my private investigator. Detective Lisa Hernandez from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. And 3 more people Thomas wasn't expecting. Sarah's brother, Michael. Patricia's son, David. And Rachel's daughter, Catherine. Thomas's face went white when he saw them walk onto the patio. "What is this?" "This is a celebration," I said calmly, "of family. And these people are family too. Michael is your late wife Sarah's brother. David is Patricia Brennan's son. Catherine is Rachel's daughter. I thought it was time we all got to know each other." Victoria stood up. "This is insane. We're leaving." "Sit down, Victoria," Detective Hernandez said. "Nobody's going anywhere." Amanda looked like she might faint. I stood at the head of the table, a glass of wine in my hand. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Did you honestly believe you could forge documents, file fake transfer papers, and I wouldn't notice? Thomas tried to bluster. Diane, I don't know what you think. I think you and your daughters are thieves. I think you've done this before. 3 times. Sarah, Patricia, and Rachel all transferred their estates to you right before they died. How convenient. Those were legitimate transfers. They wanted me to they had Alzheimer's, a traumatic brain injury, and were on medication that affected their judgment, respectively. They couldn't properly consent. You manipulated them. Michael spoke up, his voice shaking. He forged my sister's signature. I've been saying it for years. Catherine added, my mother was terrified of him at the end. She told me she didn't want to sign anything, but he kept bringing papers. I looked at Thomas, at Victoria, at Amanda. You thought I was just another woman you could rob. But here's what you didn't know. I built these hotels from nothing. I fought banks, hurricanes, recessions, and an entire industry that didn't take women seriously. Do you really think I wouldn't fight you? Sharon stepped forward with folders. These are the forged documents you filed with Monroe County. We've had them analyzed. The signatures are fake. We have your email chains discussing the fraud. And we have statements from your father's previous victims. Detective Hernandez added, Thomas Whitmore, Victoria Whitmore, Amanda Whitmore. You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit grand theft. The next 2 hours were chaos. Miranda rights, handcuffs, Amanda crying and claiming she didn't know, Victoria threatening lawsuits, Thomas silent, staring at me with pure hatred. As they were being loaded into police cars, Thomas finally spoke. You vindictive. I walked right up to him. No, Thomas. I was smart. I loved you, or I thought I did, but I loved what I built more, and you couldn't take it because I never showed you my full hand. The criminal case took 11 months. Victoria and Amanda pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery. They each got 3 years. Thomas went to trial and was convicted of elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and after new investigations into the 3 previous women's deaths, additional charges that added years, he got 18 years. At 68, that was essentially a life sentence. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the arrests. The prenup held. Thomas got nothing. His legal fees bankrupted him. Today, I'm 67 years old. My 4 hotels are thriving. Jason decided to move back to Florida and helps me manage the business side now. Rita is still with me after 15 years. I never remarried. I don't think I will. But I tell this story to anyone who will listen, especially women, especially older women, especially women who've built something with their own hands. When I got married at 57, I made a choice not to reveal that I was the sole owner of my hotels. I let them believe it was complicated, that there were trusts, other stakeholders, corporate structures. Some people might say I should have trusted Thomas, that if I didn't trust him, I shouldn't have married him. But here's what I learned. Protecting yourself isn't about distrust. It's about recognizing that the person you love today might not be who you thought they were tomorrow. Your achievements, your property, your life's work, those things are yours. They don't become negotiable because you fall in love. That secret, that choice to keep my cards close, gave me 4 years to see who Thomas really was. Time to notice the red flags. Time to build evidence. Time to protect myself. If I'd told them from day one that I solely owned $6.5 million in real estate, maybe they would have moved faster, pushed harder. Maybe I wouldn't have noticed until it was too late. But I didn't tell them. And that secret saved me. My advice? Know what you have. Know what it's worth. Protect it legally. And don't feel guilty about keeping some information private until you're absolutely certain who you're dealing with. Love is beautiful, but naivety is dangerous. Your life's work isn't something you gamble with. Not ever. I still run my hotels. I still walk the beach at sunset behind my Key West property, feeling the sand beneath my feet, looking at the business I built 28 years ago. I still welcome guests personally, still make decisions about renovations and marketing, still take pride in every 5-star review. The difference is, now when someone asks me about my properties, I tell them the truth. These are my hotels. I bought them. I renovated them. I own them. Every room, every reservation, every employee, mine. And then I smile and add, and they're going to stay that way. Because I was never their victim. I was never their mark. I was their reckoning. And I'm still here, on my slice of the Florida Keys, living my life, running my business, exactly as I always have. Alone, maybe, but free, absolutely. And that's worth everything.